Be fabulous. So welcome, a formal welcome to I call this a pop-up event, and I call it a pop-up event because it's an event that we didn't promote intentionally. We didn't promote in advance, too far in advance. I wanted it to be kind of day of, and kind of a special treat for everybody that's joining us here. I'm super excited about the topic. When I first conceived of this topic, I thought, these are issues that are coming up in a very, very serious measure, in our society. Big debates are breaking out. I'm talking about, the protest. Say before before what's going on now, obviously with the protests. But this is something that's been on a lot of people's minds and has, in a strong way, divided people, and it's made the cover of magazines and articles and headlines, and it's a topic that needs to be addressed. And really at the core of it is, one second. At the core of it is, just getting one more feed up, making sure we're live on Facebook. Okay. At the core of it is a question of personal autonomy versus the greater good, or the alleged greater good. So I want to break this down into several steps. We're going to start with a conversation about face masks. And I intended to start the class with a prop, with a face mask on. But you know what they say, God plans and then people forget. I'm sorry, man plans and then man forgets. So I forgot. But imagine, if you will, now I'm asking you to imagine me and a face mask. It happens. When I go out, I put on a face mask. The question is, what if somebody says, I don't want to wear a face mask. I want to go, free country, free world, I want to go outside and I don't want to wear a face mask. So what's the counter argument? No, you have to wear a face mask because other people need you to wear a face mask. I hear that. I still don't want to wear a face mask. I should retain, the argument is, I should retain personal autonomy and the freedom of choice to choose whether or not I put some piece of fabric, cloth, whatever, over my face when I walk outside. It's a God-given right? It's an inalienable right. It's a right that should be, some say, just part of our essence, our natural existence and God-given existence. We should have the right to choose how we're going to walk outside. And the government, right? The government, the state, the city, whatever it is, should not have the right to tell me what to wear. So, impromptu poll. Here we go. This only works if y'all raise your hand or the virtual hand. There's a way to raise your virtual hand. Let's see. How do we do that? If you go into, there's a way to do it. If you can figure it out, figure it out. If not, just raise your hand. So let me know. What's your take? Huh?
I think it's in chat.
In the chat, yeah.
Under participants.
Under participants, go there, you can raise your hand. Here we go. Thank you. Here's the question. You ready? Here's the question. Do you believe in the right for people to choose whether they wear masks or not? Or do you believe the government has a right to tell you you have to wear a mask? Let's start with one. Who believes that personal autonomy rules the day? That you should choose whether you wear... This is a safe space. Other than the fact that we're being broadcast on Facebook forever, for anyone to see forever, and your names are literally written on your... Other than that, it's a completely anonymous format to answer as your heart dictates. Who believes, in theory, personal autonomy, freedom of choice? No one? Okay. Who believes the... Oh, I see. Okay. All right, we're getting... Joy says yes. I see some tentative shoulder shrugs. I don't know if that's kind of like just rolling the shoulders to work out a little bit, or if that's... Okay. Who believes the government has a right to tell you, wear a mask? Okay, some hands going up. I see, good, okay. I'm seeing some hands going up for no sides, which is also okay. Undecided is also a category. I want to ask another question, because this touches on another modern dilemma. And again, these are not my dilemmas. These are societal dilemmas. And there are people on both sides of the issue and very strong opinions on both sides. And I think no matter what your position is, I want to encourage you tonight to think about both sides of the argument, because that's how we're going to deal with the core question of how do we resolve the tension between personal autonomy and the greater good. What about my business? Let's say I run a small business. Yeah? And let's say it's not like the business is a luxury bringing in extra money to pad some sort of, savings account or investment. No. This is going straight from my business to my family's mouths, right? This is how they eat. I own a shoe repair shop. Yeah, let's say I own a shoe repair shop. This is how I make money. I own a barber shop. This is how I make money. I don't have another income, right? I'm not going back to school at this point. This is how I earn my money. Okay? I want to keep my business open. The government says, no, shut your business down. And I say, that's very nice of you. Yeah, that's very nice of you to say, but I actually need to support my family. And you don't have the right to tell me to shut my small business. Do you know that in the United States of America, in various states, there were people that kept their businesses open in violation of their state's laws? Have you heard about these cases, the news? Yes? Okay. Have you heard that people were arrested because of that or shut down? Yes? My question is, do you feel that people should have the right to run a business, to feed their families, despite, or people have a right to make that choice and run their businesses, not forcing anybody to come into the business? They should have a right to open their business. Yeah, who believes that? I see a few hands are going up. Okay, who believes that the government has the right to tell you, under no, without any, I don't know what the right phrase is, but under no circumstances or conditions, you cannot open up your business? Who believes the government has the right to tell you that you cannot open your business? Okay, again we have, yeah.
Rabbi Ari,
yes.
I don't think it's that simple. If our government acted the way that like say in England, where there's a safety net and people weren't losing their business, losing their homes, my hand would not have been raised for that. But there isn't a safety net, and that's why. That's why I feel that way.
Let me clarify what you're saying. What you're saying is that you're tending toward saying that people should have the right because they don't have another option. But if there was another option, then yeah, the government should have. If the government's giving, the government can also take. Correct?
Yes, that's right.
And I hear that. And what I'm saying, and I think that some of us are even thinking of this question in reference to the government assistance, the funds that have been made available with the various bills that have been passed by Congress in the last few months, with the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Plan, where the government is actually helping out small business or businesses, for 2 months. But here's my question: forget about that. And maybe you're saying, well, how do you forget about that? Theoretically, forget about it. Conceptually, yeah. Let's say there's no money coming in, and let's say you need this money. Does a government have the right to tell you cannot operate?
Rabbi Sollish, can
yes.
I say something?
First of all, hi Ruby, it's great to see you, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity to connect. Right? Thank God for Zoom.
Ray gave me this. She sent me the link. So.
Nice. All right, Ruby, go ahead.
So we're talking about a matter of saving lives. That's what the issue is. And I heard a man named Young, who used to work for he still does. He writes for the Atlantic magazine. He said that there are people who are protesting, that they want to, break out of all this, but the majority of the people in the United States are trying to continue to do this because lives are at stake. If lives were not at stake, it would be a different story. The government shouldn't tell anybody they can't have to close a business for no reason, but we're talking about lives being at stake here. That's, to me, the
great point. Excellent point. So what you're saying is it's a little bit imbalanced, because the value of going to work is here, let's say, but the risk or the value of not opening your business, right? The value of opening your business is here, but the value of not opening is all the way up here because we're dealing with life and death. But then I could just tweak the scenario and make it, equal life and death on both sides. I could give you a scenario where somebody not opening their business, for them is theoretically a matter of life and death. The core question I want to get at, and none of the examples that I'm going to give are perfect, but really the core I want to get to is not to resolve the question. It's really not to get an answer, right? It's really to understand the tension that exists. And it exists in so many different areas, but the tension between what's best for me versus what's best for y'all. Are you with me? And by the way, I meant all y'all, but I just made it small. I made it more condensed, right? There's a tension often in life, and this is repeated again and again and again in countless scenarios. The tension between what is best for me personally versus what is best for the collective group. And the question is, who wins out? When it's the case, not all cases are like this, but when it's a zero-sum game, when only one can win out, who wins? The individual or the collective? There's a name, by the way, for the philosophy that says the individual must sacrifice for the collective. You know what that's called?
The social contract.
Fascism. Fascism,
No, it's the social contract. And I believe it was Locke in the 1800s who formulated this. That we do not have absolute perfect freedom like we would have on an island, where we could do anything we wanted, anytime we wanted. But if we want to live in a society, maybe I want to drive 150 miles down the road, but to live in a society, I have to give up some freedoms, and that is so
Excellent.
I can live in society. And that's called I accept.
Beautiful.
Social contract.
Excellent.
There's limitations on things I can do.
Perfect. Very, very well. Mark, thank you. Very well said. What Mark is saying, wow, that's a mic drop. I love that. You go. All right. So here's what I want. So what Mark is saying is, no, the individual, because the individual lives in a larger space, a larger community, so by definition, the individual is going to have to compromise for the collective good. Excellent. The question is, when it comes down to it, do we say that in all cases? In all cases, the individual yields to the collective? When do we say that the collective allows the individual to do what they want? Let me give you another example. Yeah, I'm going to give you another example. This is another example that raised the ire of many, and that is seatbelt laws. Yeah, the government says you want to drive a vehicle, your private vehicle that you paid good money for, right? You need to put on a seatbelt. And a person says, seatbelt? I'm not wearing a seatbelt. It's my car. It's my life. It's my body. There's no one else in my car. I'm not wearing a seatbelt. And the government says, you don't wear a seatbelt, we're going to pull you over. And when we pull you over, we are going to give you a fine. Maybe we're going to take away your license. Maybe we're going to take away your, I don't know how far it's escalated. I never was pulled over for this. But, we're going to punish you for not doing this. Do you know that people push back on this, saying, how dare you tell me what to do? Let me give another example. What about motorcycle helmets? For a while, you could ride a motorcycle without wearing a helmet. At a certain point, a few decades ago, the United States government said, nope, you have to wear helmets, and encouraged states to pass laws mandating that their citizens wear helmets while riding motorcycles. Well, wouldn't you know it? These cases, this went to the courts, to state supreme courts, pushing back on motorcycle helmet laws. People saying it's unconstitutional. How dare you tell me how to ride my Harley or whatever, right? Yamaha. I don't know if that's a real bike. That's like a, maybe that's like a
bike, Rabbi.
Huh?
It's a real bike. Yes, there are many people who like to ride their Harleys without their helmets.
No. I'm saying if a Yamaha's or no. I was saying I was saying a Harley versus Yamaha. Yamaha's more like the scooter thing, whatever. Vespa, that's European. But getting back to Harley, right? Somebody says, how dare you? It's my Harley, right? I got the leather jacket. What do you mean? Right, I got the bike, I got the leather jacket, I'm going to ride, no helmet, no deal, garnish. That's it, I'm just going for it. And the government says, the state says, suddenly, out of nowhere, we're passing a law, you have to wear helmets. It went to the courts. Do you know this went? Raise your hand if you're familiar with these cases that went to the state Supreme Courts. Yes? Okay. We have some legal experts amongst us. Fascinating. Do you know how the courts ruled? The courts ruled that it's constitutional. It's okay. It's kosher to make that law. And different states had different reasons, different rationales for it. Some said, I'll give you one argument was, you're telling me it's a personal decision that you're making? No. If we need to scrape your, not you, anyone here, but, Pliny, Anonymous's, if somebody gets into an accident and they end up deceased, who's paying for the ambulance and who's paying for the highway shutdown and who's paying for all that stuff? The state's paying for it. All right, so we're paying for it. We have skin in the game. Then we're going to tell you that you need to wear a helmet. There we go. And other such rationales along similar lines. In other words, governments will typically say that your individual, in justifying a law that comes down against individual personal autonomy, individual freedoms, the government will typically say, well, your freedom is impinging on us, either the collective good or on what the government, what we are being, what we're on the hook for. And therefore, now it's not a personal matter anymore. If it was just personal, if you're just sitting in your car in your driveway and not moving anywhere, don't wear a seatbelt. By the way, I'm not giving you legal advice. This is my disclaimer. This is not legal advice. I don't know what happens in your own driveway. That's a good question. But theoretically, the government might say, whatever you want in your own driveway, but once you enter the roadway, now we care about that because it affects all of us. And yet, there's pushback. There's pushback till today. I've spoken with people who have told me, and I think we've done enough polls and enough hand raising, but I've spoken to people in 2020 who believe that seatbelts should be based on personal choice, and seatbelts should not be mandated, and there's no legal grounds for that, and it's unconstitutional, and even if the courts say otherwise, it doesn't make a difference, it's still wrong. Why? Because it infringes on personal autonomy. And there are people who feel strongly, no, the government has an absolute right to pass such laws. There are people that talk about government becoming too big and too involved in personal life, and some people say that's exactly where government should be. And this is not going to be a political discussion tonight. We're not going to go to a political space. I want to get to the core logic, or the core issue. The core issue is, what keeps someone's privacy or personal choice personal, and when does it move into a different space, and who decides? And we're going to look at how U.S. law has looked at this question, and how Jewish law has looked at this question. And we're going to especially focus on the hostage dilemma, as we'll see in a moment. But first, one more example. This is a technology example. Smartphone. I don't have an iPhone. This is an Android, a Samsung. But imagine this was an iPhone, okay? Or just imagine an iPhone, for that matter. The government says to Apple, hey Apple, how's it going? And Apple says, hey, things are good. How's it by you? And the government says, we have a request. We'd like you to create a back door in your operating system. We want you to create a way in which we, the government, at any point in time, can go in and access someone's personal data from their phone. Their call history, their text messages, their WhatsApps, their files, their browsing history. We want access, backdoor access. That means, right, they have a way to get in without it being detected by the user. We want a way to get in and access the data. And they say to Apple, create that for us. We're waiting. This is not a theoretical question or theoretical request. The government literally requested this from Apple just a little while ago. What was the context that spawned or spurred this request? The San Bernardino shootings. Do you remember those? The terrorist shooting in San Bernardino County, California, about a few years ago. A couple comes into a ballroom and they start firing, they start shooting. Yes? Okay. There was a chase and the police shot and killed the shooters, the murderers. And then they recovered their iPhones. But they were locked. The government is saying, presenting both sides, the government is saying there's potentially valuable, incredibly valuable data on those iPhones. Or that iPhone. I don't remember if there was one or two. Why? Are these people part of a terrorist ring? Who else is involved? Is it state-sponsored? Is it just two people gone rogue? What's going on here? What's the extent? And if we have that information, we might be able to save lives. If we have that information, we might be able to stop another attack from happening. Or at the very least, to learn more about who these people were connected with and understand better the web of terrorism that's going on in the United States within our own communities. Yeah, that's what the government's saying. The government wants to get into the phone. The government cannot get into the phone. Postscript, the government got into the phone, which we'll talk about in a second. The government can't get into the phone. So the government turns to Apple and says, hey, Apple, you made this stuff. I'm sure you can break it. I'm sure you know how the architecture of the phones and the operating system, you understand it certainly from the inside out. Give us a way to get in. And Apple says, or give us access to the phone. And Apple says, we don't have access to the phone. In fact, we use that as a selling point. We tell people all the time, buy an iPhone and your data's safe. So they're not speaking about this in terms of sales. I'm kind of sort of doing that. But they're saying that people trust us. And we don't want to violate that trust. And we don't feel that it's right to violate that trust. Right? People buy iPhones. They expect their content, the content of their phones, to remain secure, to remain on lockdown, to remain private. It's their personal data. Now, you want it? Go ahead. Get in there. Oh, you can't? Well, we can't either. You want us to create something new? That you're overstepping. That's an overreach. The Apple pushed back in the San Bernardino case. You know what happened? The government hired a third-party company, I believe with Israeli ties, unconfirmed. I don't remember exactly. I believe with Israeli ties, to hack into the phone and get the data. They got it. Well, guess what? There have been more cases since. More shootings, more cases of terrorism, more investigations, and more iPhones. And Apple subsequently patched the hole that third-party company used to get into the iPhone in the San Bernardino case. The government has since patched that hole. In other words, imagine a hole in the fence. It's now covered up again. And no one can get in. The government recently, I don't know if it's 6 months ago, 4 months ago, 8 months ago, 10 months ago, my timeline is a little off. I didn't Google it immediately before this class. I can't tell you exactly the timeline, but it's a fact. The government went back to Apple and asked Apple for, once again, access. Apple once again refused. The government has taken Apple to court. And the government is suing Apple, saying that Apple must create a way for it to get in. And of course, Apple is saying, you don't have a right to ask that. You want to get in, you get in. You can't force us to get you in. That's not right. There are many considerations, right? Many considerations. A person might say, well, terrorism. You got to fight terrorism, right? We need to find, this is very important that the government has access. Another person might say, are you kidding me? You know what kind of Pandora's box this is going to open, right? 1985, the government now can at any point in time, if they believe they have some sort of cause, they can just, they get some sort of warrant or whatever it is signed by by a court, by a judge, they can now go ahead and access all my files? By the way, you would be horrified to find out, unless you know this, and then you're already horrified. But either way, you'll be horrified to know the amount of data on you right now, if you have a smartphone, the amount of data that is freely available and being peddled, including every place you've been. Literally every place you've been is available. As of very recently, I think it may have just changed, cell phone companies were selling the data of the pings on their towers associated with phone numbers. So the amount of data that's available freely is shocking. The government now wants full access. Somebody might say that's can you imagine what's going to happen if we give the government access to phones? It's a privacy nightmare. It's a disaster. No way. So, but the counter argument is, well, what about you don't want to stop terrorism? You want another cell, God forbid, to take lives? Are you willing to allow loss of life? Right? Ruby, you mentioned before about loss of life. Yeah, loss of life, loss of privacy. Some people give their lives for privacy. Some people give their lives for freedom. What was it, Braveheart, right? Who once said, something, freedom? Freedom, right? Is freedom worth dying for? Is lack of freedom worth living for? What I'm saying is, this is another example of a case which has many different angles to it, but which can be understood along these same lines. How do we figure out, how do we reconcile, on the one hand, the freedom of the individual, autonomy, personal freedom, freedom of my own data, my own privacy. I have a right to have my stuff where I have it and you don't have a right to look at it. Versus, no, it's in the greater good. No, the society needs it. We all need to know. We all need to know we're violating your privacy. Or you don't have privacy anymore because we need to know. That's the question. I see an interesting question on the chat. How is this different from if a government demands gun manufacturers to impregnate guns with an RFID, that's like an ID code that ties back to purchaser of that weapon? Interesting. Like a tracking system on a gun. Yeah. Do I have the right to purchase a gun anonymously without being tracked? Or can the government mandate that I be tracked, or that this gun be tracked, or the ownership is tracked? I cannot tell you how prevalent the tension is. And protests and legal battles again and again and again and again, nonstop. And when you drill down to the core, what's at the core? The struggle between personal rights versus the rights of the collective, or alleged rights of the collective, because someone has to make that argument on that other side. And it's going to be somebody or some people that are saying, we speak for the collective. Who gives them the right? Let's just say they're elected to do so. Let's just say, right? But that's the tension. The goal in this opening, the first 35 minutes or so of this conversation, is not to come to any conclusions. My goal was to present the tension. The tension is real. And you might find yourself leaning in one case one way, in another case another way. Maybe you feel that obviously you need to wear a seatbelt, but you know what? The government shouldn't have access to phones just because they want it. If they can get in, they can get in, but they shouldn't be able to force Apple to create that. Maybe you feel maybe you feel, because maybe there are nuances. Maybe there are particulars about each case. But at the core, you have a tension. And the tension doesn't go away. The tension is repeated and replicated in many different scenarios. So tonight, I want to turn our focus on a case that is well documented, well discussed in both U.S. law and in Jewish law, and see how this one case is parsed. How we deal with competing considerations, competing rights, competing values in this one case, which, as you know, of course, is the hostage dilemma. What's the hostage dilemma? Let's go back to the year 2012. November 2012. There's a gentleman, an American, who is in Syria. Why is he in Syria? Because he's a journalist, and he's covering what's going on with ISIS. And so he's hanging out in Syria. November 22nd, 2012, this man is abducted by ISIS, leaving a coffee shop. He's kidnapped and held hostage. His name, you might recall his name, James Foley. James Foley is an American journalist who is held hostage by ISIS. Along with James Foley, there are a number of other hostages, journalists, photographers, other foreigners, Westerners, who are taken hostage by ISIS. Many of them are released. James Foley was never released before his execution. In one of the videos, if you recall, just a few years ago, ISIS would put out these execution videos. Do you remember that? Yeah? Videos that showed a desert landscape with almost an endless horizon in the background. And typically, the hostages dressed in an orange jumpsuit, and the terrorists standing behind them, and then ending in the ultimate horror of a beheading. These were put out, these videos were produced and disseminated. People watch them. I've never watched them. I mean, I've seen like a screenshot of like how the video starts, right? But not the gruesome end. But these videos have been watched by millions of people. James Foley lost his life. He was murdered by ISIS. If you recall, there was even an ISIS terrorist who spoke English with a British accent. Remember that? Yeah. And yet, James Foley had companions that were also taken hostage that made it out. What happened? Well, even though other governments will not admit to it, the policy, many other governments won't admit to it, many governments, European governments, have a policy of paying ransoms. You see, what did ISIS want? They can speak of that they're doing this in the beheading videos. They're doing this because of American aggression and whatnot. They can say that. But what we know about ISIS back in the day was that when they were holding hostages, they were asking for ransoms. In the case of James Foley, Foley's family came forward and said what they wanted. They wanted $123 million. And other journalists who were held hostage from other countries, they were released. The understanding is because they paid the ransom. But James Foley's family didn't pay the ransom. The U.S. government didn't pay the ransom. And he was executed. After his execution, after his murder, I want to share with you a text. Stay with me, please. Hold on. Let's see if this is going to work. It might not work. Let's see. Okay, tell me if you can see this. Did it come up? Yes? Okay, fantastic. New York Times article, August 20th, 2014. I'm going to read it. Kneeling in the dirt in a desert somewhere in the Middle East, James Foley lost his life this week at the hands of the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria. Before pulling out the knife used to decapitate him, his masked executioner explained that he was killing the 40-year-old American journalist in retaliation for the recent United States airstrikes against the terrorist group in Iraq. In fact, until recently, ISIS had a very different list of demands for Mr. Foley. The group pressed the United States to provide a multi-million-dollar ransom for his release, according to a representative of his family and a former hostage held alongside him. The United States, unlike several European countries that have funneled millions to the terror group to spare the lives of their citizens, refused to pay. Along with the 3 Americans, ISIS is holding citizens of Britain, which, like the U.S., has declined to pay ransoms, former hostages confirmed. The terror group has sent a laundry list of demands for the release of the foreigners, starting with money but also prisoner swaps, including the liberation of Afia Siddiqui, an MIT-trained Pakistani neuroscientist with ties to Al-Qaeda, currently incarcerated in Texas. The policy of not making concessions to terrorists and not paying ransoms has put the U.S. and Britain at odds with other European allies, which have routinely paid significant sums to win the release of their citizens, including 4 French and 3 Spanish hostages who released this year after money was delivered through an intermediary, according to 2 of the victims and their colleagues. Kidnapping Europeans has become the main source of revenue for Al-Qaeda and its affiliates, which have earned at least $125 million in ransom payments in the past 5 years alone, according to an investigation by the Times. Although ISIS was recently expelled from Al-Qaeda and abides by different rules, recently freed prisoners said that their captors were well aware of what ransoms had been paid on behalf of European citizens held by Al-Qaeda affiliates as far afield as Africa, indicating that they were hoping to abide by the same business plan. I'm sharing this to make it abundantly clear that other hostages were released because ransoms were paid. James Foley lost his life and ransoms were not paid. But it gets even deeper. James Foley's family said, after this, and I have an article from Newsweek that I printed out. Is it backwards or are you seeing it the right way? Is it backwards? It's the right way? Yeah, it's backwards for me. Sorry, I need to peek in on this. U.S. threatened James Foley's family over ISIS ransom demand, his mother says. His mother wanted to pay the ransom. His mother, his family, they raised $5 million. And they, although it's far below the $123 million, they felt that $5 million would help secure James's release. When the U.S. government got wind of the fact that they were starting to negotiate, the U.S. government I'll just read you the article. Diane Foley, the mother of journalist James Foley, who was beheaded by ISIS on August 19, 2014, told ABC News that government officials threatened the Foleys to stop them from paying a ransom to free their son. The threats reportedly came from a prominent military officer on the White House's National Security Council, who warned them that paying a ransom to ISIS would support terrorism. And that's the key. You see, there's a law in the U.S. It's called the Federal Material Support Statute. And it's a law that forbids anyone in the U.S., any U.S. citizen, from supporting a terrorist group. The government sent officials to James Foley's family's home, to his mother, and said, if you dare pay ISIS $5 million, guess what? We are coming after you. 3 times the family was threatened. We're going to come after you because at that point you will have given $5 million in support of ISIS, in support of a terrorist organization, in support of terrorism. Do you want to be a terrorist supporter? And that stalled them long enough that James was beheaded on August 19, 2014. Can you imagine a scenario where the family would feel bitter and or frustrated? Raise your hand if you can imagine a scenario, yeah? Do you understand how this shifts the narrative? You see, at the core, the family is saying, we have a right. We have a right to save our son's life. Right? That's our right. Our son is in danger. We have a right to save his life. The government is saying, we have a policy. No paying ransoms and no supporting terrorism. So, I'm sorry, but you can't. It's in the greater good not to. The family says, it might be the greater good, but it's in our son's good, and it's in our family's good to pay the ransom and to secure his release. Are you with me on the tension? Do you understand how now in this scenario, the person whose life is at the entity, who's in danger, mortal danger, immediate mortal danger, not future mortal danger, but immediate mortal danger, is James Foley, is on the side of the individual versus the collective? Are you with me on how that has shifted in this scenario? I hope what I'm saying makes sense. Yeah, again, we have another scenario, the hostage dilemma. You have a scenario where there's tension between the right of an individual to save their son versus the collective interest. And what we say is, well, it's not within the best interest of the collective nation that we should allow you to do that. So therefore, we're gonna tie your hands behind your back and not allow you to do so. That's the tension. So what I want to do now is go through a little bit of the U.S. legal piece on it, and then we're going to explore it from a Jewish legal perspective. What's clear is that in the case of James Foley, his mother was threatened with legal action if they ransomed their son. What's not so clear is what would have happened had they done so. And somebody might say, well, they should have done it anyway, and that's fine. We can always judge someone else's behavior and second guess them, but this is what happened. The family was threatened, the family didn't pay, and their son was beheaded. But what would have happened had they actually paid it? Would the government have indeed gone after James Foley's family? And would they have a legal argument? Well, some argue that in retrospect, had they paid it, they could have, and had they been arrested and faced a court of law, they might have had a legal argument to spare them. There are different legal arguments, like the necessity defense, for example, which is when a person commits a crime but claims that the circumstances forced them to do so. They had no other choice. There are many different examples of this, but there are also severe restrictions on this. Like, you can't claim that if you put yourself into the negative position in the first place. For example, if a classic example of this is somebody who drives their friend who's dying, God forbid, to the hospital, but they're over the legal limit of alcohol, right? So they're pulled over for drunk driving. They're saying, yes, I was intoxicated or I was over the legal limit, but I had somebody was dying at life and death. I had to do a necessity defense. Well, you can challenge the necessity defense in a situation where you set yourself up for it, where you did something to put yourself in that compromised position. And there are other qualifications. We don't have to get into all the qualifications of the necessity defense, but that's an angle that the family or the lawyers might have explored had they paid the ransom. There's also the duress defense, which is saying that I did so, not out of necessity, but I was forced to do so, like there was a gun to my head almost. And in this case, the family might argue in a court of law, again, had they paid, had they been brought to justice, the family might have counter-argued, perhaps could have counter-argued and said, it was under duress. Not necessity, but duress. We were literally forced to do it like a gun to our head. The gun was to our son's head. We had to pay. Yeah, you're gonna say we paid a terrorist, but that was straight up duress. It's unclear because the precedents are not 100% lined up with this case. There are many precedents about necessity defense and duress defense being used and being challenged or being rejected by the courts based on different scenarios. The question is, how does this specific scenario of James Foley and his family paying the ransom, how would that, tumble through or follow through the legal system and the arguments? It's unclear until it actually comes to a court of law, until it actually stands in front, goes in front of courts, and the courts hear the various arguments. But one thing is certain, that it's possible the family could have paid and not been punished. But again, what happened was they were threatened, they were pressured, they didn't pay, and he ended up dead. Many people are outraged. Many people have a problem with that. In fact, the administration the presidential administration post that administration, actually no, I'm sorry. I don't think it was an administration change. I believe that at some point after that, I believe the government announced, or the president announced, that the government would not go after those who do pay the ransoms because of what happened with James Foley and others, that they did lose their lives. But that was more anecdotal, that's kind of like a promise, like, trust us, we won't go after you. But again, the question is about the legalities of it. But at the core, again, is this tension. So I want to explore this now. Now we've kind of talked a little bit about the U.S. perspective, the U.S. legal perspective. Let's talk about the Jewish perspective. What does Judaism say? Famously, we know that Judaism values life over everything. And we also know that in Jewish law, the mitzvah of pidyon shavuyin, which is redeeming captives, is considered to be one of the greatest mitzvot, one of the greatest good deeds or obligations that one can possibly do. Countless stories have been told over the years in countries or in times that were very difficult, of monies being raised in order to redeem captives. We know that the mitzvah pidyon shavuyin is an incredible mitzvah. You might therefore find it surprising, the following story that I wish to tell you. The story goes with Reb Meir Mirottenberg. Let me give you his, I don't know if I have a bio here. Give me a second. Okay, his full name, Rabbi Meir ben Baruch of Rothenburg. In Jewish, he's known as Reb Meir Mirottenberg. Okay, so he lived in the 13th century. The late 13th century, the late 1200s. Well, it's 1286, and he takes his family and he decides to emigrate. He lived in Germany, and he decides to move to Israel. Along the way, he gets arrested, he gets stopped, and he gets hauled back to Germany. The rabbi's trying to leave, not happening. And what happens is, the authorities, actually the king, I believe, King Rudolph, by order of King Rudolph, he was imprisoned. Hold on, give me a second here. Give me a second. Okay, by order of King Rudolph of Germany, he was imprisoned, taken to a fortress, and held for a ransom. And you should know, he was kept there for a number of years, for 7 years, and he died in captivity 7 years later. Would you be surprised to learn that during those 7 years, Reb Meir Mirottenberg, who was a renowned scholar and a renowned halachic Jewish legal authority, he forbade anyone in the community from paying his ransom. He said, "You're not allowed to pay my ransom." He died in captivity. He died under confinement. Why? Very surprising. Why did he say not to redeem him? It all goes back to a Mishnah. It all goes back to a Mishnah, which I'm going to share with you, a teaching from the Mishnah, which is the core canon of the oral law of Torah. And I'm going to share with you a Mishnah that might be surprising. But you'll tell me. So let's do this now. I'm skipping some of the legal U.S. texts, U.S. legal texts. Okay, Talmudic analysis. This is what the Mishnah says. Take a look. The Mishnah says in Tractate Gittin, for the purposes of Tikkun Olam, or maybe more accurately stated, out of consideration of Tikkun Olam, societal remedy, we do not redeem captives for more than they're worth. So if the hostage takers are asking for more than the value of the hostage, then you are not allowed to pay that ransom. Okay, so that's what the mission says. And what's the rationale, or what's the consideration? What's the key word? The key word is, or the key phrase is, this one right here, Tikkun Olam. Now you and I know Tikkun Olam as saving the environment and making sure things don't go extinct, and that's another usage of the term Tikkun Olam. Here it means to protect society. For the benefit of society, we do not pay exorbitant ransoms. The question is, what does that mean? Now, in the case of Rabbi Rothenberg, the understanding is that it was an exorbitant sum that they were asking, and that's why he told the community, don't pay it. You're not allowed to pay it. But what's the reason? Tikkun Olam, what does that mean, societal remedy? The Talmud asks that very question and gives two options, two opinions. Take a look. This is a very important piece of Talmud. Text 10b. What is the Tikkun Olam? What is Tikkun? In this case, what does that mean? And the Talmud gives two options, two possibilities. Is the concern about a financial burden on the community? In other words, are we concerned that because it's an exorbitant sum, that it's gonna deplete communal funds, it's gonna destroy the community coffers, or perhaps that overpaying will incentivize more kidnappings? The Talmud asks, is it a financial consideration, or is it a security consideration? Is it money or security? Is it that we say, Tikkun Olam, you cannot overburden the finances of the community? The ransom, the hostage takers want a crazy amount of money for the ransom. No way. We don't have that money, and it's too burdensome to obligate the community to pay it. Or is the concern not a financial one, but a security concern? We're concerned that paying this huge ransom is only going to do one thing: incentivize more kidnappings, and more kidnappings, and more kidnappings, and put more people in harm's way. Therefore, no ransoms, no negotiation, no nothing. Lamai nafkamina. What's the difference? Either way, you don't pay the ransom, right? What is the Talmud saying? Is it because of the finances, or financial consideration, or security considerations? I have my question. Who cares? Who cares whether it's financial or about security? Either way, you're not supposed to pay it. Either way, it's too much. There's a difference. There's a difference. What's the difference? The difference is, let me stop the share because I don't have an excerpt of this. The difference would be, what if the family has the money? What if you're not going to be burdening your Tikkun Olam, you're not harming the community coffers because the money is coming from private funders. The money is coming from the family. So you have no concern, in this case, you have no concern about the money coming from the community. The money is coming from the family. Can they pay it? According to the first rationale of the Talmud, they can. Because the whole concern was it's going to overburden the financial coffers, the coffers of the community. In this case, it's not, go right ahead. But according to the second rationale, that the issue is not a monetary issue, it's a security issue, then we tell the family, yeah, you might want to pay the ransom of your family member, but you know what's going to happen? Then you're putting more families at risk. We don't let you save your son by putting someone else's son at risk. Therefore, desist from paying this ransom, because by doing so, you're gonna end up putting more people in harm's way. That's the upshot, or the implication of the second option. I hope you're understanding what I'm saying is. What I'm saying. The Talmud gives two rationales for why not to pay the ransom. Either it's because it's too difficult financially, or because it's going to pose a security risk. If it's because of the first issue, when finances are not a concern, then go right ahead. If it's according to the second issue, then across the board, you shouldn't pay it, because it will always put people's lives at risk. What does halacha say? What is the Talmud gives two options. What's the final halacha? I'm going to share this with you right now. The Code of Jewish Law says, this is it, text 11. Rabbi Yosef Karo in the Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law, paskins, he rules. We do not overpay when redeeming captives. This is for Tikkun Olam, and watch how he explains it. So that our enemies will not target us and attempt to take us captive. Boom! There it is right there in black and white. In halacha and Jewish law, the rationale, the reason why we don't overpay when redeeming captives is not because of the finances. It's not because it's too much money. Who has the money? Because then you might have the money and then you could pay it. No, that's not the reason. That's not the concern. The reason why we don't overpay is because by overpaying, it's only incentivizing the kidnappers. It's only incentivizing more kidnapping and more hostage taking and more of the same. And it's putting more and more lives at risk. Therefore, halacha says, black and white, Code of Jewish law says, do not pay or overpay the ransom. Okay, I see some people are wanting to ask questions. Stephanie, do you have a question that you wanted to ask? Or is your hand up from before? Okay.
No, I thought we were supposed to raise our hand to agree with something. That's all.
No worries.
Sorry.
No worries at all. No worries at all. I just wanted to just check in. Okay, so here's the deal.
Thank you.
Here's the deal. Halacha says clearly that we do not overpay for redeeming captives in order to save others, spare others from the same fate. That's why Rabbi Meir Rothenberg said, you might have the money might not be an issue, but if you pay that money for me, you're going to encourage the German government to go ahead and capture all the rabbis. If you don't deal, then you're going to discourage them because they know they're not going to get their demands. They're not going to get the money or whatever it is that they want. If you pay, then everyone's a target. So don't pay. This is what halacha says. Understand what's happening here. In the great debate between personal autonomy, personal freedom, and the greater good, halacha comes down, in this case, on the side of the greater good. Halacha says, we do not spare this person because sparing this person is going to bring about the demise of others. It's directly enabling, encouraging, facilitating additional kidnappings and additional putting people at harm. This is what halacha says. The question, is everyone with me so far of what halacha says about ransoming? Okay. So if we were looking at the James Foley case from halacha, right? What would halacha say to James Foley's family? No, you can't pay it. You can't pay the ransom. Because when you pay the ransom, you are endangering others' lives. But don't we have a right to redeem our own son? Don't we have a right to free him, to save his life? But by saving your son's life, you're putting someone else's son's life at risk. And that's not so kosher. Understand this. It's a horrible position to be put into from a perspective of the law, of a judge or a rabbi or anybody being forced to render this decision. But this is the side that halacha comes down on. This is from a Mishnah, from the Talmud. I showed you the evolution of this from the Mishnah that says don't redeem captives for Tikkun Olam, to the Talmud that discusses the two rationales, to the final ruling in the Code of Jewish law that says the rationale is not a financial consideration. It's solely about security. We cannot put more lives at risk. You should know that this case, similar case, came up during the Holocaust. I forget now which concentration camp it was, but I believe it was Rosh Hashanah Erev Rosh Hashanah, the Eve of Rosh Hashanah 1944. And the Germans, the Nazis came in to the guards, the Jewish guards of the camp, and they said, you have to gather, you have to round up, I think the number was 14 or 15,000 Jewish teenagers, teenage boys, and put them in a holding area. And the understanding was that tomorrow, on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, they will all be executed. And the Germans knew the Nazis knew the Jewish calendar, and they were doing it specifically to align with Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year. And they had no choice, or whatever it was. They rounded up 14,000 or 15,000 Jewish boys, and they were being held. Well, what happened was immediately, parents, fathers, came to the guards, the Jewish guards. Oh, and the Nazis left. They were going to come back the next day. So what happens? Deals. Yeah, people running, pulling together anything they could pull together to negotiate with the guards to let their son out. But the guard said, look, if I let your son out, yeah, if you give me a bribe and I let your son out, the Germans were very good with counting, right? We know this, right? The Germans were very precise. So they're going to count, and if there's any single number less than 14,000, then it's not going to be good for us. So we need to ensure that there's still going to be 14,000. So we're going to be pulling someone else. There was a father whose son was selected, had been selected, who went to his rabbi in the concentration camp. Now we know this because the rabbi survived, and he wrote a book of questions and answers, halachic, Jewish legal questions and answers that he was asked during the Holocaust. He writes, he was asked this question. Father came to him, Erev Rosh Hashanah, and said, I have the means, I have the ability to pay the rent, to bribe the guards to get my son out, to save his life. But I know that by doing so, I will be putting someone else who's not currently at risk in harm's way. I don't know who that is, and I'm not selecting that other child myself. But I know that by saving my son, a necessary result of that will be that someone else's life is at risk. Am I allowed to save my son? The rabbi answered him. He responded and he said, I don't have enough source texts in front of me to render a decision. I cannot tell you what to do. The father decided in that moment that if the rabbi could not tell him that it's okay to do, then it means that it's not okay to do. He did not save his son. And on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, he stood up in the synagogue, in their makeshift synagogue, crying, weeping bitter tears. This is documented. And he said, with a ripped shirt in front of the entire congregation, he said, my sacrifice was greater than Abraham's. Abraham sacrificed, or was willing to sacrifice his son. He was told by God. I wasn't even told. But I sensed that it wasn't the right thing to do. That was and you can question his decision from today to tomorrow, and that's fine. I don't think that's appropriate, but that's just my take on it. This is a story that happened. The hesitation of the rabbi in saying, yes, you can save your son, was the same consideration. Because by saving one, the other is going to be endangered. And that's the core rationale behind the Jewish law that says we don't pay exorbitant ransoms to save people from captivity. Because by paying it, it's not that it's going to cost a lot of money. Come on. And if it doesn't, the core issue is if you pay the ransom, and it's a lot, you're going to encourage more. And when you encourage more, you're putting other lives at risk. This question came up in recent times with Gilad Shalit. You guys remember Gilad Shalit? Yes? Who remembers Gilad Shalit? Who was Gilad Shalit? Unmute yourself if you remember who Gilad Shalit was or is.
He was that kid that got kidnapped by Hamas, and then we gave them like a bunch. I think it was like over 1,000.
Correct.
In order to get him back. Correct.
Gilad Shalit was an Israeli soldier, Tzahal, an IDF soldier who was kidnapped by Hamas. And Hamas said, we're holding on to him until you pay our demands. And what's our demands? Release terrorists. 1,023. Well, at least that was the final number. Israel, he remained in captivity for, I think, 4 years or so, or a bunch of years. Finally, Israel gave in to their demands and released 1,023 prisoners. Now, look, how do you measure what is considered to be an exorbitant sum or not? I can't give you a mathematical formula, but I'm going to do a rough estimate and say that 1,023 for one is an imbalance, is what we would say overpaying. I'm not saying that a single life is not infinite. It is. But 1 for 1 sounds like a fair balance. 1,023 for 1 sounds like what we would call an exorbitant sum that's being requested, or a higher than normal request. So it seems pretty cut and dry. If you ask halachic authorities, what would halacha say about Gilad Shalit? Do you give the 1,023 to get back the one or not? Seems pretty cut and dry. The Mishnah, the Talmud, halacha says, you're not allowed to overpay when it comes to ransoms. This is considered, I think clearly this is considered overpaying. Why? Mibnei Tikkun Olam, because of Tikkun Olam. What's the Tikkun Olam? Not because we don't have the money. It's not about money. It's because the concern that this is going to cause more kidnappings. And you're going to have more Gilad Shalits. Right? It's only emboldening terrorists, the terrorists, and terrorism. It's only encouraging more and more and more. So it's dangerous to the next guy. If you save this guy, it's going to endanger the next guy. And yet you should know that there were many rabbis in the case of Gilad Shalit, and many rabbis in previous cases of prisoner swaps in Israel, who said that, you know what, it's okay. The question is why. So I'm about to introduce some new concepts. You know, every rule has exceptions. With Jewish law, it's the same way. We have principles, and then of course we have every case is unique. So what might be unique about the case of Gilad Shalit or other similar situations? So I want to share this with you. Some rabbis said the following. Some rabbis said that when a soldier goes out to defend his country, his or her country, we are sending that person into harm's way. We, the country, are sending, and therefore we, the country, need to take responsibility. If we are the ones sending them into harm's way, then we need to take responsibility. So if it's a private citizen, if it's a journalist or whatever, a James Foley situation, that's one thing. That's one case. Then we say, look, you can save him, but by saving him, we're putting everyone else at risk, theoretically, or others at risk. So we don't say you save one at the expense of others. We don't say that. But that's a general case. But in a specific case where you're the one sending them out into harm's way, you're the one that sent them on a mission, you're the one that put him in the hornet's nest, so to speak, at that point you cannot turn your back. You have a responsibility to get your man back, to get your soldier back. You sent him in, you bring him out. If it costs 1,023, because again, the balance here is the individual versus the collective, right? In the case, I'm sorry if I didn't draw this connection continuously through. Let me make sure to reset this. Halacha says that you don't redeem the captive because of Tikkun Olam. Tikkun Olam means you're putting others at risk, which means that we're saying we don't put the individual over the collective. The collective overrides the individual. But the collective harm and potential overrides the individual harm that we're facing right now. Even though one is right in front of us and one is down the line potential, and it's not certain 100% because anything could happen. Nonetheless, the fact that it's affecting all of us, right, means that you don't rescue this guy. This one person is not rescued because of the greater good. Well, when it comes to Gilad Shalit, again, one could argue, Gilad Shalit, sorry to his family, but you know what? We can't. We just can't. He's an individual, and we have the collective good to think about. But when the collective itself is sending the individual into that space, then you can no longer fall back on, well, the collective doesn't like it. It's no good for the collective. Who sent them there in the first place? The country. That's the collective. So then you have to take responsibility. So if it's an individual versus the collective, that's one thing. But the collective versus the collective, then you do rescue. Does that make sense, that distinction? Yes? Some rabbis said that's why in cases like Gilad Shalit and other similar cases, the Israeli government is permitted, according to Jewish law, to pay the ransom and to get back that soldier. Because the country put them into harm's way, the country is obligated to get them out of that harm. The second rationale that's given for Gilad Shalit in similar cases is because imagine you don't rescue Gilad Shalit. What's the message you're sending to your soldiers? Yeah, we don't have your back. That's the message. The message is if you're taken hostage, If you're taken captive, sorry, you're on your own. And you know what that means for a soldier? The next time you're facing a confrontation, are you going to go all in? Or are you going to kind of hang back to have an escape? Think about it. Are you going to go all in knowing that your country has your back? Or are you going to be afraid because you know that if you get captured, you're on your own? And some rabbis said, the pikuach nefesh, the danger to life that is born of an army, especially the Israeli army, right? Organic, homegrown, every man, every woman counts in that army, right? Everyone counts in the IDF. For a military to feel that that their backs are not covered, to feel that their country doesn't have their backs, to feel that the government won't step in and save them, to feel like they're on their own, is to dishearten the entire morale and the confidence of the military, and to cause greater communal harm than the harm of potentially fueling more kidnappings. Does that make sense? In other words, we're looking at it as the individual versus the collective and saying the collective overrides the individual. But according to this reasoning, it's not individual versus collective. The collective itself has an interest in rescuing Gilad Shalit. Not just for his family, but for him. Because without rescuing him, your whole army's morale goes down the tubes. And then everyone's at risk. So for the collective good, you need to rescue. You need to save. You need to ransom, pay the ransom for your own soldiers. And thus, it came down by both rabbis and government officials that paying that ransom, releasing those 1,023 terrorists, was worth it. In the case of Gilad Shalit, to get him back, not only worth it, but necessary. And that's how that story ends. What happens if it would be a private journalist, if somebody happened to be, visiting or touring or whatever in a part of the country near where Hamas is hanging out, and God forbid they're kidnapped? Would the government come to their rescue and release terrorists? Likely not to the same extent. I can't say for sure because you never know what decisions could be made, but based on halachic principles at least, it seems to be much less grounds for permitting that type of ransom paying than in the case that actually happened with the soldiers. Because again, you have two rationales. Number one, we sent you in, we should get you back. And number two, if we don't have your back, it's harming us anyway, so the collective is a danger either way. But when you're dealing with a private individual, private citizen, you don't have the same considerations. No one sent you in. You chose to be a journalist. You chose to go there. That's the risk you take. Number one, we don't have to have your back. Number one, and number two, it's not going to bring down the collective morale if we don't rescue you. It's again just a private individual and a family, and that reverts back to what halacha says. That in this case, and it's only one case, it's by no means answering the face masks and the small businesses and the seatbelts and the helmets and the iPhone and the government privacy issues. It's not answering all the cases. But in this one case, we do have halachic precedent that we do not put the individual over the collective. We go with the collective over the individual. And Rabbi Meir Mirataberg said, "Let me remain in captivity till the day I die." The community cannot put itself at risk by paying it and encouraging more kidnappings. This is the stated policy of the U.S. It's the stated policy of Britain. And the final analysis does align. I can't speak for how it's always applied in all situations. I don't want to speak beyond, let's keep it focused. But the core policy, or the core concept of a nation, of a country having a policy to not pay these types of ransoms, is not so far-fetched from a Jewish legal perspective. It rests on Jewish legal grounds as well. And so, how do we get back? Getting back to the questions that we started. Do we always put the collective before the individual? Do we say to the individual, it doesn't matter what you think you should do with your face? We are mandating for the greater good, right? Tikkun Olam, for societal benefit, we mandate that you wear a mask. For Tikkun Olam, for societal benefit, we mandate that you shut your business until we allow you to. For Tikkun Olam, we mandate that you wear a seatbelt. For Tikkun Olam, we mandate that you wear a helmet when you ride a motorcycle. For Tikkun Olam, we mandate that no communications are really private anymore. For Tikkun Olam, we mandate X, Y, and Z. I'm saying that because I don't have the examples off the top of my head, but many other cases. Do we apply it there as well? It's hard to say. It's hard to say because each case has its specific nuances, right? What's the risk versus the benefit? What's the individual versus the collective? How do you parse everything? It's very complicated. And so my goal tonight was not to give you solutions or to solve all the questions, but to give you firm halachic answers, because I don't know that we have firm answers, because things change, things shift. And a lot of times it depends on the data on the ground. How dangerous is it, right, for the individual or the collective? So a lot of factors can shift. But one thing I wanted to explore tonight was the tension, and to show you how in one area we have clear guidance as to how to deal with the tension. And to summarize, when it comes to kidnapping, when it comes to ransoms, when it comes to exorbitant ransoms that are way beyond what we would consider reasonable to pay, halacha clearly says we can't pay it. You should know one more plot twist. Tosfot on the Talmud says, Talmud commentary, the grandsons of Rashi. It's a collection of commentators in this one commentary. Tosfot writes, and Gittin in the Talmud says that when the captive's life is in danger, then you do pay the ransom. Then Tikkun Olam goes out the window. But most Rishonim, most early halachic authorities that understand the Talmud do not say that. In other words, Tosfot would say that in James Foley's case, you do pay it. You do put the individual over the collective because their life is literally right now at risk. But most opinions say even when that person's life is at risk, you put the collective risk over the individual risk. So even in this final analysis, there's still one more opinion to kind of open the door for another perspective. But nonetheless, the normative view in the Talmud, most Rishonim believe and maintain that even in cases where life is at risk, you still don't pay the ransom. And the simple reason is because of the collective danger. There's a threat to the individual's safety and security is being compromised, but there's a threat to the collective, and that threat to the collective supersedes the individual. That's one example. That's one case. Can we apply it across the board? We can't. How do I know this? Because I'll give you another case from the Talmud. The Talmud says if a group of people are traveling, imagine, a minyan, 10 people are traveling. Yeah? 10 Jews are traveling. And some sort of murderer or whatever, some ruthless sadist accosts them on the road and says, we're going to, or maybe a band of murderers stops these 10 Jews and says to them, we're going to kill you all, or you can hand over one and then we'll just kill the one. You know what halacha says? You cannot hand over the one. Why? Because by you handing over the one, you're killing this person. You are murdering them. And you can't murder one even to save the collective. So here's the counterpoint, right? So in this case, we don't say that you sacrifice the one for the collective. No one's handed over, and everyone shares the same fate. Why is that case different? Well, in that case, you're taking an active role in actually submitting a person to murder. Whereas in the case of the kidnapping, you didn't kidnap them. Someone else kidnapped them. They're already in danger. You're not creating the danger. The question is, should you create the escape hatch? And the answer is, by creating the escape hatch, you're putting more people in danger. So you're actively endangering others. And that's a constant thing that consistently we're not supposed to do, create danger for others, certainly when it's a collective group. Like I said before, the story from the Holocaust, right? The father wants to save his son. That's one way of looking at it. Or you can say the father is delivering an innocent young man to the hands of death. And that's forbidden. So again, different ways to parse it, different ways to look at it. But in this one scenario, where you didn't create the danger just is. You can spare the danger for the individual, but put the collective at risk. We don't say that you do that. You spare the collective. You don't spare the individual. All right, so that's it for face masks and the hostage dilemma. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope all of the points that I talked about came across clear, because there are a lot of pieces to this, and it's a very, I will tell you, in the Talmud, it's a very dense area of halacha. It's a very complicated and complex, a very web-like complex area of Jewish law. There's a Mishnah, there's the Talmud. Like I said before, there's different opinions on the Talmud itself. So there's layers on this. There's what halacha says in the Code of Jewish Law, but it's a lot of things shift. We have the exceptions, but hopefully this comes through. Life is infinitely valuable. That's always an easy thing to say. But sometimes it comes down to one life versus another life, or one life versus many lives. And that becomes a more complicated scenario. Do we save the one life, or do we, by putting other lives potentially at risk? It's an impossible question. Halacha has its way of understanding it. U.S. law has its way of understanding it. James Foley's family was spooked because of it. He lost his life. Would halacha differ? It's hard to say. Perhaps not. Halacha might have said the same thing. In the case of Gilad Shalit, we have an understanding. He was a soldier. There's an exception there. What about the case of masks, seatbelts, small business seatbelts, helmets? A lot of factors there. I'll let you, see, this is like a DIY class. I'll let you apply it as you decide. So I'll let you think now. Instead of telling you my conclusions or discussing it now, especially because we're at the time, 9:30, so I'll let you explore it on your own, and let me know your conclusions, what you think. All right, thank you very much for joining me tonight. I appreciate you being here with me for this pop-up lecture, this pop-up class, surprise class. I have some more surprises. I don't know, maybe I won't make it such a surprise. I think I'm going to share with you something that's coming out tomorrow. It won't be a surprise, but I'll do that in a moment. But first, let me check in. Any questions or comments or thoughts about what I just shared? Questions, comments?
Ari, I have a question. I think I sent you a chat on this.
Oh, I haven't been checking that. Sorry. Go ahead.
I remember that when Leah had your first child, I believe you said it was that situation. Even though it was Shabbos, you called a driver.
Correct. Yes.
You were able to do that. Also save one life.
Right.
It's like the world.
Right. I did see that question, but I just answered. I answered a minute ago, because it's not just saving a life; it's putting other lives at risk. It's like the question of the Holocaust, right? It's not so simple. If it's just saving a life, of course you save a life. But what happens if, in the process of saving this life, this one life, which is infinitely valuable, if in that process itself you're endangering the infinite valuable lives of the many? How do you make that decision? What do we do then? Right? This father could save his son's life. That seems like a no-brainer. Of course you save your son's life from the Nazis. Okay? The problem is, you pull them out, there's 1,399 kids, and they're going to choose one more. And you might say, well, that's not my issue, but you created that issue. Right? You directly created that issue by rescuing your son. So by saving a life, you took a life. And that might be more complicated than just, saying saving a life. So while what you're saying is absolutely true, but it becomes complicated. It can become, in complicated situations, it's complicated. That's, according to many, what the Talmud means, or what the Mishnah means when it says Tikkun Olam. We don't pay the ransom, even though it's saving a life. Why? Because by paying that ransom, more kidnappings and more people are going to die. That's the problem. We're worried about literally the lives of others. So by saving this life, you're endangering other lives. And that's something that we can't do. So it's, in the final analysis, it's complicated. Any other thoughts or comments? Thoughts or comments? No? Okay. So, that was a very quick no. I'm sorry for the quick no. I'm still listening, but I'm pulling up something that I want to show you, a visual that I want to show you. So talk amongst yourselves. Let me pull something up, but in the meantime, feel free to ask away. If not, I'll jump right back in. Okay, I'm jumping right back in. Here we go. I'm excited to show you this, because this is hot off the press. My days are filled with thinking about what education, inspiration, messages, interesting, compelling ideas to share with the community, to bring us all together, to to teach, etc. This is something I've wanted to do for a while. In some classes, I've mentioned this before. In some sessions, I've done this to a certain extent before, but never to the extent that we're about to do this. So now you're wondering, what am I talking about? And you don't have to worry for much longer because I'm about to share my screen with you. So this is a new event, a new program coming soon to a Zoom near you. It's called The Giving Tree, A Jewish Perspective. Lessons from a children's classic on education, parenting, and leadership. As I'm just reading you, just in case you want me to read. It's a kid's book, so I'm reading you the story here. A Zoom event with Rabbi Sollish. That would be me. You know the story. Here's the rest of the story. Tuesday, June 9th, 8 p.m. Don't miss this. I know the Giving Tree book, the color is green, but this is not the book. This is the event. So we've gone with a little bit of a different color palette. But I'm excited. This information, the email for this is going out tomorrow morning. You are the first people, without exaggeration, you are the first people outside of myself and a very small group, a handful of individuals. You are the first people to know about this. I am super excited. This is going to be just an incredible conversation. This is going to look at the intersection between Shel Silverstein and Maimonides, to understand the model of leadership, the model of education, the model of parenting that Shel Silverstein is revealing in his book, The Giving Tree. I will tell you that few picture books, are as acclaimed or as well known as The Giving Tree. It's in the top, whatever it is, of children's picture books of all time. It's so well known. Some people love it, and I will tell you this, some people are very, very disturbed by it. And some people are in the middle. They love it and they're disturbed by it. And I don't know what that means, but whatever. But life is complicated, things are complicated. This is going to be a monumental look at The Giving Tree, understanding its deep messages, and it's so deep. These messages are so profound. This is perfect for anyone who's in education, in leadership, in parenting. Linda's writing that, I hope I can mention this, right? That she hates this book. Right? Laughing. So looking forward to the class. Yes, many of us when reading it, were a little bit disturbed by, what just happened in this book? That seems a little bit dark. Like, that doesn't seem like, hey, kids, gather around for a bedtime story and watch as, spoiler alert, we cut down Mama Tree. That seems a little intense. We're going to get into it line by line. This is combination storytelling. When I say storytelling, like storybook time. I'm going to be reading the story. We'll have it up on the screen. Reading the story and examining it from a uniquely Jewish lens with the overarching goal of understanding, of gaining tools in leadership, parenting, and education, and other fields as well. This is not to be missed. It's going to be incredible. Join me for this next Tuesday night. If you're wondering what's happening next Monday night, well, by now you should know, or at least be signed up for it. By now you should be signed up for it, or at least know about it, that we're starting the Yiddish course in 1 week from tonight. My gosh, I am loving everything about this Yiddish course. If you don't know about the Yiddish course, you got to check it out. It's on our website. It's on Facebook. It's called the Yiddish course. I mean, literally, it's called the Yiddish course. It's with Yiddish professor Dr. Miriam Udell from Emory University. I was looking today just on YouTube for Miriam Udell, saying she has these wonderful interview videos that are so amazing. I'm going to start posting them on Facebook the next few days. If you're not on Facebook, God bless you. It's great. If you're on Facebook anyway, then jump in on it. Check out my page, or In-Town Jewish Academy page tomorrow. In the next few days, I'm going to be posting videos of Dr. Udell in interviews about Yiddish. You'll get a sense of her energy. She is remarkable. She's amazing. She's an incredible teacher, an incredible communicator with a gift for the Yiddish language and culture and literature. And you're going to get a university professor teaching you Yiddish conversation and Yiddish culture from beginner or intermediate levels. It's going to be amazing. If you're Yiddishist, if you belong to like a Yiddish society, then maybe this course is not for you. But anything below that, anything beneath that, This is for you. You don't need to know the Hebrew. You don't need to know how to read Hebrew letters. Everything is designed for you. You. Yeah, I'm looking at all of you. There is still room in the class. We've had an incredible response to this course, but there is still room. And I say that without asking her how many she's comfortable teaching online. But I am, from my perspective, we're still available. I would get in as soon as possible, just to make sure. But it's going to be phenomenal. So that's the Yiddish course. That's starting next Monday night. So next Monday night, same time, 8 p.m., Yiddish course with Mir Mudel. Sign up for it online, intownjewishacademy.org/Yiddish. Next Tuesday night is the Giving Tree, a Jewish perspective. And then following that, some good stuff. Including, I'm revealing all my secrets tonight. Might as well. We're all friends. Some of you are going to be very happy with my announcement right now. Judaism and astrology. It's coming up. Linda, I know you're excited about it. We've talked about this. Judaism and astrology is set for, let me see the date that I have for this. Judaism and astrology is set for, let's see, the next Tuesday, Tuesday, June 16th. So next Tuesday is the Giving Tree. You know what? Why am I doing it that way? This Tuesday night is the last class of Judaism at Home. Next Tuesday night is the Giving Tree. The next Tuesday night after that is Judaism and astrology. And after that, all my secrets out of the bag right here. Life After Life, a 4-part series on what happens after this. What happens? What does the other side look like? What happens after this? Based on classic Jewish and Kabbalistic sources. We're going to go through the sources, go through the text, and you'll learn what Judaism has to say about life after life. 4-part series starting the following Tuesday in June. I think it's probably the 23rd. So we have here spoken for the second, Judaism at Home. I have something else to tell you. Oh my God. It's impossible. Too much stuff. The second is Judaism at Home. The 9th, which is the course, the last part of the 5-part series, many of you are joining us on that. The 9th is the Giving Tree. The 16th is astrology. The 23rd for the next 4 weeks and for the next 4 sessions is life after life. One more thing. Some of you may know the legend of my potato kugel. I'm making available a limited batch of DIY Shabbat dinner kits featuring Leah's challah, Leah's chicken matzo ball soup, my potato kugel, grape juice, and a Shabbat inspirational companion. Limited number of kits available. We haven't gone live with the details. I'm hoping that it happens this week. But listen, everything is moving. We move at a quick pace here. Stay tuned for more information about that. Super excited about that. From our home to your home. That's the line over here. From our home to your home, Shabbat. So look out for that information. Basically, what you want to do is just hit your refresh button on your inbox just throughout the day. And if you're not getting our emails or it's going to spam or something, let me know. We can fix that. I have my people. I don't have people, but we can certainly talk about fixing that. Okay, that's it for tonight. I've kept you long enough. Although it's not so late actually. Not bad. We've been later. Anyway, I appreciate you staying with me, and I appreciate you being here with me tonight on this event. Face masks and the hostage dilemma. I hope you learned something. I hope you were a perspective opened up perhaps for you. And I'm looking forward to seeing you for all these opportunities and more. We have many, many things coming up. All right. I guess farewell. Thank you all. It's great to see you all.
Can I say something?
Yes, Ruby, go ahead. Yes.
That's okay. First of all, will you send that food to Baltimore? Can I get that kit?
Ooh, I know. I was thinking that, right? Do we ship? It's going to be a little bit hard and a little bit, I don't know.
Yeah, I know.
It might be a little too difficult.
I just wanted to say one thing. The majority of the people in America really are trying to do the social distancing and whatever, how many times they wear the mask or whatever, because you hear only about the ones who are protesting because they're making the news. That's what makes news. And so the media is showing that. They're not really showing. You can see how many hands went up when we
Right.
vote in favor of what we continue to do.
Correct. Yes, I agree with you. Yes, correct. Oftentimes what you hear vocally is the minority. And I would say, I agree with you. My intuition is, just anecdotally and just the way I feel also, that most people are actually okay with face masks and okay with, well, it's hard to say. If someone's business is, okay, I'll leave the business aside because that's, I think, a little bit trickier, but okay with seatbelts and okay with helmets. I think most of us are. But you have people that feel very strongly the other way, feel very strongly that they have a personal right. And the question is, are there grounds, and how do you just discard someone's, how do you just do away, how do you dismiss that perspective, or do you dismiss that perspective, and what's the counter argument? And I think Judaism in this one case gives us a little bit of language, the language of Tikkun Olam, that gives us a way of kind of thinking about this. One way is for your good, but there's another good, and certainly in that case, lives are at stake. Just how we apply it back again is complicated. But your core point, 100% agree with you. I think the majority are on board with some of the measures. I think also it gets complicated when it comes to iPhones and security in the government, because that I think also you might have a little bit more of a split, a little bit more of an even. I'm not saying which way but a little bit more of an even split of people saying, I don't want to relinquish my privacy. I don't want to give the government access whenever they decide, versus people saying, well, no, the government needs access. By the way, it's not only the phones. There's a lot of surveillance stuff now that was implemented after 9/11 that still exists today. There's a lot of government surveillance that originated post 9/11 that everyone was on. I think, most people were on board with then because we got it with terrorism. And now people don't think about it, but when they think about it, they might have a second thoughts about it. So these are very complicated questions, and there's no simple answer, but some things to think about. Thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you. All right, we'll see you all. I'll sign out. Laila Tov. Have a good night. See you tomorrow, and basically always tomorrow night. Judaism at home.
Laila Tov.
Laila Tov. Bye guys. Take care. Take care all.